We could dance, but you gotta keep it up a little something like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, like this.
Welcome to Tech Talks, episode number 3.
Episode 3, we are going to be covering squat pattern, and the exercise we have chosen is the barbell back squat. How to squat? Well, depends what exactly you want to achieve in your squat, whether you want to build your booty, build your quads, shift the most amount of load, to find a balance between them. So we're going to go for a barbell back squat that the goal is sort of a midpoint squat, something that's not there to overemphasize glute growth, not there to overemphasize quad growth, but a nice, happy, in-between squat. To give you a bit of a technical breakdown of this squat, we're going to run through cues to get you set up for success. How we're going to start from the base, which is bar height at the rack. I am a fan of the bar height being sort of between base of the chin to sort of nipple line. Somewhere around that chest mark is a really good start. Ideally, what we want is that the bar is low enough that when you get under and you stand upright, the bar clears the rack, no problem. No having to get up onto your toes to get the bar off. All good and well when it's lightweight. The heavier it gets, the harder it is going to be for you at the end of a working set to sort of clip that bar over. So just from a safety point of view, you want to be able to be under the bar, stand up, step out, so that when you come back, you can walk straight into the rack, no problem. So that's rack height. Then what we go for is, we want the hands to be as close as your shoulder mobility allows you. This means we can get a nice tight posterior chain, which is going to help keep our trunk nice and supported. From that point, step underneath the bar. What I want you to do is that the elbows slightly back to help contract the mid-back, and shoulders dropped, that we engage in those lats, tightening the lats. So elbows slightly back for a tight back, and shoulders drop nice and low, those lats to be able to pull nice and tight. Step out of the rack. Foot placement will be anywhere from hip width to wider. This is where there will be a bit of variance depending on your limb length. You'll find a position that's nice and comfortable for you. Then what we want is a nice ribs to pelvis brace. And then we're going to start by breaking at the hips. And after we break at the hips, we allow the knees to drive forward. So break at the hips, knees drive forward, and upright. All right, so those are the cues to help get you started on a squat. Now, again, there's always some nuance to it. As per any movement, bodies vary from person to person, and that's why we said with foot stance, depends on the leg length or ankle mobility. There's so many factors, but for the most part, that'll be getting you, following those cues, going to get you most of the way there. If needing any more information, reach out to us if you have any more questions to what further cues you could be using. We're now going to go through some common errors. First error being, obviously, bar set too high. So, if I were to set this bar a little bit higher on the rack, all of a sudden, I stand upright and the bar is at my shoulders. I then have to get onto my toes to move. And again, this is all good and well until the weight is really heavy and you find yourself too tired to be able to get that little lift. As well as when it is high, you tend to have to, as you saw, I looked left and right to see if the bar is going in versus just walking straight into the rack. Downside of that is you can get the one on, think all is well, go in for the second one, thinking everything's fine, just for it to miss the rack, and you have a whole different problem on your hands. So error number 2 is not having a tight upper back. So ideally we get under that bar, elbows slightly back, get that mid back tight, shoulders drop down, lats are pulling nice and tight. And that gives us good stable torso. But if we relax it, straight away you notice there's a drop here. As I squat down, as that weight gets heavier, the upper back can start to collapse a bit as we go through, and then it makes it a bit of a tougher movement. So, one, that weight can have the sort of chance of actually drawing you further down, as well as we become way less efficient in the squat movement itself. The third common error is not making use of a rib to pelvis position. A lot of the time, similar to like a deadlift, not using a good abdominal brace comes from that want to have a really, the gold standard seen as an upright back position. But overextending the back is also harmful. So by not using a good strong brace, what happens is we get into this anterior tilt to keep us torso upright and puts an immense amount of strain on our lumbar spine. Another common error we find is a stance that is too narrow. Now, if you have the ideal mechanics or the ideal limb lengths and mobility for squatting, you can have relatively narrow stance and have this picture perfect form. But that's kind of not the case. So foot width varies from person to person, and it's up to you to take a bit of time to find where the ideal foot stance is for you. But generally, if you find that you're going in for a squat, and as you're going down, you're battling to maintain your center of mass at that stance, or you're going down and your heels are lifting, or you're having to tilt your pelvis and round the spine to get into a depth point, means that most likely your stance is a little bit too narrow. And don't get fixated on the point that there's, one ideal stance. Keep moving the feet a little bit wider and toes slightly outwards till you find a point where you can get into a squat comfortably, loading your weight without the heels raising and without the pelvis having to tilt in order for you to reach that depth. The next common area we're going to cover is coming from the floor up, and that is hips shooting up instead of hips driving forward as we drive into the ground. So essentially what we see is get into our squat position, find our way down, and those hips come up before we start going up. And at that point, we then essentially turn the squat into a good morning. Ideally, what we want to see is as we squat down, when we come up, we want the hips to stay forward, allowing the knees to stay forward as well, so that we get the quads involved. The moment we allow those hips to shoot up from the squat, we asking the hamstrings, the glutes, and that spine to do all the work, and we miss out on all the work the quads could be doing while squatting up. And the last common error we're going to cover is our knees closing up as we're on our way down. So ideally, along with that foot stance and the knees driving forwards, we want those knees to also move outward slightly. That slightly outward movement is going to allow the hips to have enough space for our body to drop down into position without any problem. What you might find is as pushing up, there might be a slight amount of movement of the knees coming in, provided that as that happens, they then tend to move themselves out again as you're moving up. Not a problem. What that sometimes is just simply the adductors tightening engaging and the glutes being in a slightly more lengthened optimal position, what we just don't want to see though is that they come in as we continue to go up. So again, allow your knees to open up slightly as you're dropping down. Give yourself the space you need to hit the right depth.
Thanks for that, Grant, for teaching us how to squat properly.
At least I'll try. I mean, don't quote me if I said anything wrong.
I think you did a great job. So funny little fact, I hate squats, and for years I neglected to do squats because I just thought they were tedious, a lot of work, and till today I don't like doing them. But they are super important because having a strong lower body is critical for everyday life. But how squats is applied in my training all year round is squats remain a strength movement. I never work past that 6 to 8 rep range, and I never do more than 4 sets. I don't like using squats for hypertrophy. I like utilizing them for strength work. For hypertrophy, I'll use something else. But Grant's going to tell us a little bit more of how best to apply squats in strength or hypertrophy or speed or power.
From a technical side, definitely squats. Just can't go wrong when it comes to strength training. Again, squats, heavy fatigue ratio. Really difficult movement to bring yourself to failure from a muscular point of view for higher volume. So again, is it a good tool for hypertrophy? Of course, because you can progressively overload it well. It is going to drive some great adaptation, but really specifically from the point of hypertrophy, it's difficult to get any one muscle group close to failure on a squat before you just feel outright flattened energy-wise. If I look at the moment, I'm doing some volume work on squat, and the purpose of me doing it at the moment is from a work capacity point of view. I've lost a lot of work capacity in my legs, and so I am doing higher rep work on my barbell movements, and it is for that purpose. Not so I will get some hypertrophic gains, but even if you're doing solely strength training, progressive overload is going to create some form of adaptation. But it's just a better tool to use in strength work than it is for hypertrophy. For hypertrophy, use something that, again, has a little bit less axial loading and allows you to drive one given muscle group more to failure so that you feel like it's the actual legs failing and not your system as a whole. From a power point of view, I also a bit on the fence. I think it can be useful probably for the top end of your power work. But power work is generally, from a percentage point of view, quite low and done with speeds. And I find that when it comes to lower body, there are, again, better options to go with, such as things as vertical jumps or broad jumps. Tend to prefer those. So definitely squats, from a technical point of view, best applied in strength training, a good tool in hypertrophy, and from a power point of view, I would probably use some other options.
I think if you had to take the two of us, right, I can squat a drastic amount of weight. I can squat over 200 kilos. But if you had to tell me to load the bar and do 10 reps on 100 kilos, I would only be able to do one set, and then my working capacity is done for. My lungs are burning, my asthma flares up. Whereas Grant, who does the higher rep range, he could load the bar and he can bust out four sets of 10 and walk away still being able to breathe. He might be out of breath, but he would be in a far better condition.
Somewhat be able to breathe.
But the point is, you'd be in a far better condition than what I am.
100%. And I think that goes to show why, as mentioned, even if you are doing it for strength training and using it primarily for strength movements, it's still essential to have blocks in the year where you're doing volume work, because work capacity matters. If we're talking about being able to handle more loads for a given amount of volume over time, your system as a whole needs to be able to handle that. And so making sure that you are putting moments in your training where you're working on your work capacity is super important.
Happy days.
Happy days.
that was squat patterns. I think that was great. I think everyone always jumps to back squat first, one of the first squats that they try to master, and it's not a bad squat to start with. But Grant, tell me, what is next? What is up for next week?
Oh, Kim, we got a nice one. We have got pull movements. So we run through some pull pattern, and the pull pattern we're going to go for is a bent over row. Yes, we'll also be quite specific on the version of bent over row because there are so many ways about it. So if you want to know what bent over row we are doing, stay tuned and join us next week.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks so much, guys. Cheers.